Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Untethering Shame, where we talk all things shame and the effect it has on our lives when it exists unchecked. Today's episode is sure to lead us down a plethora of different avenues as we're tackling the idea of unconventional thought, or what happens when you dare to think, dream, want, or choose outside of the lines our shame-based system and society has created for you. The word conventional is defined as based on or in accordance with what's generally done or believed. It's essentially groupthink, and unless you've been living under a rock, buried in the sand, inside of a bottle that's drifted off to sea in the middle of nowhere, you know that the roots of conventional thought in our culture are rooted in systems of isms and oppression, from racism, sexism, ableism, classism, heterosexism, and the list goes on. We're creatures of comfort, and there's comfort in boxes. As much as we deny it or claim to be actively working on breaking them down, there will always be a pull for order because it reduces ambiguity. And in order, there's the creation of ladder systems. Our brains are driven to make or create knowns, and as such, perpetuate these systems we've labeled as faulty and problematic, yet are addicted to exist within. And the knowns then get served to us on a platter alongside different identities that we feel forced to accept because the alternative feels even scarier. Oh, you're Black? Here's your platter. Wait, you're a Black trans person? That's a different platter. You're a fat-bodied woman? Here's your platter. And this is exactly what today's guest is here to talk about. What are the platters he's been served? What's the impact of holding them for so long? And what's it like to let them go? Tavaris Smith is a stand-up comedian who I've had the privilege of knowing for over 20 years. We're both from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, though we've each relocated out to the West Coast, him now residing in Los Angeles in pursuit of his comedic career. From spoofs on album covers to hilarious reels and posts on social media and his performance in clubs and theaters all over the country, Tavaris has continued to etch his way deeper and deeper into the world of comedy, finding and really trying to sustain his authentic voice. In high school, he and I were incredibly close. And one of the reasons I was so drawn to him is that it seemed like we were both in the same journey in life, trying to figure out who we are or were in a sea of conformity and expectation, and wanting not only to feel seen by others, but to see others the way we never felt seen. I don't want to speak for him, but that time in my life is one heavily demarcated by masks. I was constantly performing and felt like every choice I made, from what I wore to who I dated or the job I worked, signified my character and was a symbol of my worth. I was scared to share my own thoughts. I talked myself out of going to art school in another state because I was supposed to stay local, keep the same boyfriend with the same group of friends who'd been together since grade school and with parents who'd been friends since they were kids. It was the power of small town living. There was this big, invisible box you had to exist in. But if you did that, then you at least had some false sense of security and connection. And with all the trauma that I had endured, that seemed to be all I longed for. After years of therapy and loss of distance, some forced and some chosen, from that life, I've learned so much about how I was trying to survive in that time of my life. And I've had to make peace with the fact that much of how I showed up was driven by the fear of unconventional thought, unconventional action, and an unconventional life, which seemed to be the biggest activator for shame. Let me start by just saying, hi. It has been way too long, and I don't even know how to put it into words. Grateful, excited that this podcast just acted as an opportunity for you and I to reconnect. So I'm really looking forward to today.
Yeah, same. Thanks for having me. This is super cool. It's like surreal. When you popped on the screen, I was like, oh, damn.
I know.
That's her.
I know. I had this weird moment right before I was about to log in where I was like, am I nervous? Like more nervous than normal? Like I'm nervous always because I'm a slightly anxious human, but I was like, it's the like excited butterfly feeling because we haven't, for listeners, we haven't talked to each other in like 10 years, except for distantly on social media or some sort of, I want to support you type idea. So, okay. So I've been starting every podcast episode just doing a one-word check-in. So I'm curious for you, what is one word that you would use to describe how you feel right now?
Anxious. The perfect word. Yeah. Everything about today and this process is anxious in good ways and bad ways. This is my first time renting a WeWork, so there was anxiousness of that. I kind of walked in deer in headlights, but I got to where I needed to be. And then once I sat down, I was like, oh shit, like I gotta get ready to do this. 'Cause this is my first podcast.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, my voice cracking already.
Yeah.
Yeah, so lot of firsts. But really anxious, really excited.
Yeah.
And it's so good to see you. So
I know. It's good to see you too. Well, your voice cracking might be the way that you signify anxiety, which I guess is an unfair advantage I have since people can't see me, but I am pitting in my armpits. So I will just put that out in the open. So it feels like an even playing field, because I definitely at some point will lift my arms and you will see that happening, which has been an issue I've struggled with since we first met. So it goes both ways. But
all good.
okay, so tell me, one, I guess I'm curious why you said yes to doing this. And then two, why this topic? Like, I am so pumped to dive into this with you. And I'm just curious, what was the driver for you?
Yeah, well, you reaching out alone was like, whoa, I haven't talked to this person in forever. This is so cool that, you're diving into this world. And you described like the premise of the podcast. And I was kind of thinking of like what in my life relates to, the things that you want to cover in your podcast. And yeah, just really thinking about like my upbringing, my stand-up career, creative aspirations, the pushback that comes with that.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of those things are really close to my spirit, and stuff that I still deal with today, even just like having new goals and kind of proving to myself that, I can rise above the doubt within myself and within the people around me who love me, who, don't want to, they just don't want to see me fail, basically.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that is based in that, but also, I have no desire to pursue the alternative, which is not pursuing the things I'm passionate about. So all of that. And I've never really had that conversation in depth with anybody outside of like my older brother, a couple close friends. So yeah, that's why I said yes. I was like, this should be dope.
Well, it's interesting too, because I sat with, our friendship and kind of it seemed like such close friends, but also like existing in different spheres where we were both struggling to just feel seen. And it was like when we would hang out, it felt like I see you type idea. But my off base or am I on base, I suppose, did you feel that same pressure? And is that the same pressure you're feeling now of like, how am I supposed to show up? What am I supposed to do? It doesn't feel right. It feels like I'm playing a part, but I don't feel like I'm so in it. I don't know how to break out of it. And who is the me if I stop doing that? Did any of that show up for you at that same time?
Yeah, well, I feel like most high school students go through so many identity shifts. And I think, elementary school, I was super into the arts.
Mm-hmm.
Middle school, I went to a little bit of a rougher middle school. So that was kind of made fun of. So I had that battle where I was like really wanted to do all these things like acting and doing, productions and musicals, but then, being called all kinds of things for wanting to do that. And so once I got to high school, I swung all the way back to the other direction. Like I want to be a jock basketball player, most popular dude in school. Like that was like my get all the girls. Like that was my primary focus. But one thing I always thought was cool about our friendship was that every time we hung out, it was like it kind of brought me back to like my elementary school self, where I was like, we would bond over art. And you're way better at art than I am, but like even just being in art class together, just hanging out and not trying to fit within a mold, just kind of saying whatever to each other and finding comfort in that. But yeah, and it's similar now, just less intense.
Yeah.
Just in a slightly different version of it. There's a million comedians in Los Angeles, and I'm one of them. And so, you know, when talking to family members, they're always like, how's the little comedy thing going? And like they mean it in a supportive way, but also there's hints of dismissiveness and like, you know, it's just a little hobby that he's pursuing, but like, you know, so it's less intense and I'm more comfortable with myself now than I was in high school, because I was all over the place in high school. But I think now I have like a firmer grasp on like what I want and what I'm pursuing, what I'm passionate about. So,
well, it's interesting. I get that same thing of, how's your business thing? How's what is it you do again? You know, like this kind of idea, or how's running your own business? And I joke that, I mean, I still don't even think my mom could tell you exactly what I do. And it's this weird sort of element of when what you want to do has either been deemed as something impossible, whether that's impossible for anybody or impossible for you based on aspects of who you are, where you came from, or it doesn't make sense because you're sort of creating something that fits for you. And so that's going to be different from the norm. And so all of those, I think, are met with hesitation. And when it comes from people that we love and they care about us, sure, they want to see us secure, but they forget that security and stability don't come just from having a job with a paycheck every 2 weeks and having these things. You know, we have enough data and research to show that actually doesn't amount to a fulfilled life for many people. And so you're fighting that. It's also, I'm curious because you said you're much more comfortable with it now. You know, I know with adulthood, there's this kind of transition of responsibility and things like that, but what changed? How did you get to the point where you stopped caring, or you stopped maybe investing as much in those slight dismissive comments or the hesitation from other people?
I think, well, this is all very recent. Like it hasn't been that long since I started feeling comfortable with it. I think the shift came when I first moved to LA. I was just turning 30 and I was crashing on my homie's couch, and like, that's not a good feeling, having your 30th birthday with like no door or like bed or anything. Like,
yeah.
But I had just moved to LA, and you know, with all of these aspirations, and you know, it's almost impossible to get like to not be caught up in, oh, I'm 30, I should be at this level, and then you have everyone you love and care about echoing those sentiments. And you know, there was a period of time while I was living in LA where I was like, man, this ain't it. I'm gonna have to move back. Really the catalyst to get me to stay and tough it out was my car died. And so I drove out to LA. So that's how I moved out here. And my 2005 Volkswagen Jetta.
I was going to ask if it was still your Volkswagen. Yeah.
Actually, I bought a newer Volkswagen, but it's the exact same car.
Okay,
it's
got
like
it.
A newer model. But that shit died after shortly after driving it out here. And I had no choice but to like stare all of this adversity in the face, not learning how to take the bus. I know how to take the bus, but just like learning how to get to work and having 3 different jobs, still crashing on my guy's couch. And like, I think persevering through that kind of made me feel like, okay, once I was able to save up enough money to get a proper living situation, it's like, well, there's no turning back now. Like, it's not like I love comedy any less. Like, that's what kept me going through it was like 10 months of crashing on somebody else's couch. And so I think like getting through that and also excelling in comedy at the same time, it started to shift the tide as far as like, you know, what my family thought and what my friends thought. I have like really supportive friends. And then just most importantly, like within myself, like, okay, I can get through, you know, someone attacking me on a bus after work and still go to work the next day. What's, you know, a bad night at the club at the comedy club where I bomb or something, like I can get it back. Like just keep on pushing. And so I think through that, it made me more comfortable in what I'm doing because, seeing the results, there's no better validation than that, so it makes it easier to brush off the, how's your little comedy thing, comments. So yeah, yeah.
Well, it's interesting too, because, when you talk about turning 30 and being on a friend's couch, or, I had a client a couple years ago, and this was like the bulk of what we were working through with her anxiety was, I'm supposed to be engaged. I'm supposed to be buying the house. I'm supposed to be having kids. I'm supposed to there's all these things. And so there's this idea that if you're 30 and you don't have whatever sentiments represent stability, you are, lazy, you're a failure, you're XYZ. And that's, even if you have the most supportive people in your immediate circle, that's still the norm that's been fed to us our whole lives, because you're supposed to be in this sort of linear path upward. And so I could imagine for you, it's, what does this mean about me? And then also getting to this point where, I don't think it has to happen for everybody where they reach some sort of a bottom point, but it's, you have to want something bad enough that you're willing to fight for that more than you're willing to let shame and fear consume you. Because it ultimately is what it is the breaking out of the conventional thought that your life would be better if you moved back to Wisconsin and worked a 9-to-5 job and just did comedy on the side every once in a while, or you entertained people at parties, or, whatever that might be. And so you had to get to that point of, I don't want to say desperation unless that fits for you, but getting to this point of like, if I don't go all in at this point, I'll never know, but I'm here. This is the turning point. And you accepted that. And that's really hard to do. And then obviously it's great that it paid off for you. Why comedy?
Why comedy? That's a great question. I think that comedy, I've always been a fan of challenging the norm. And I think that is the essence of comedy. There's no better feeling than whether I'm performing or watching somebody. If I'm watching them, they bring up a joke that is about something that, is pretty straightforward in the eyes of a lot of people. And then they just say like a couple sentences and just like fuck your whole mind up. Like, yo, I didn't even think about that. And it brings the laughter out of you. Like, damn, that's a great point. And you can find those pockets of like epiphanies through so many great stand-up careers and specials. And so I didn't even know that I wanted to do comedy until I was living in Milwaukee, and I had 3 jobs at the time. And on my lunch breaks at job number 2, I would write these really long Facebook stories or like Facebook statuses just about like the most random shit. Like I think I had a crush on a girl who, that I worked with, and she was beautiful. And then one day, like I was talking to a coworker, I think I'm going to ask this girl out. And then the girl was like, yeah, I just heard her in the bathroom. She had the most explosive diarrhea. And it just like completely took away all the attraction. I was young and immature at this time, But I wrote this all out on Facebook, and in hindsight, it's crazy because the girl like followed her, was friends with me on Facebook, but it all worked out. And then, people were, they would laugh in the comments, and then like I had a few people message me, oh, you should try stand up. And I'm like, I don't think so. Like, I don't really, still just kind of pushing back, like against, being a performer and everything. And, then I just started listening to like Pandora stand-up stations. And I didn't even know that there were like white comedians until 2013 or something crazy. I thought it was all like Martin Lawrence and Chris Tucker and all of those people I grew up on. And so it was just like hearing these like outside perspectives that I was like, wow, there's like a whole nother side of a comedy here. Like that's crazy. And then it started to appeal to me even more because, you know, I had like a wider palette. And just hearing people talk about different things on stage, like appealed to me a lot. And then one day I signed up for open mic at Milwaukee Comedy Cafe and I did it and been doing it ever since.
Well, it's interesting because, you know, your humor you described in the Facebook post, which, I mean, I hear you that you're like judging somebody for explosive diarrhea. Maybe that's a younger thing, but also, I mean, it's not like you were dating. It's very different. So I want to validate that. But also, you know, comedy is such an interesting thing. And particularly because I know one of the things that you have had to really think about and work through is being a Black comic. And what does that mean? And the expectations, particularly from, the industry, other comics, audiences. And there's a way that I think sort of cultural norms around racism have pushed comedy to be something that we push on Black men, particularly, because then you're safer. Like your job is to sort of entertain. Your job is to be the funny person. You can make people feel more at ease when you're around. And so there's a way that I think it has been kind of pushed that's rooted into really oppressive ways. And then there's people, and regardless of identity, but I think particularly if we're looking at race, if we're looking at sex, we're people that have used comedy as a means to tell those unconventional truths, to say things, to use their voice effectively. Dave Chappelle, Chelsea Handler, there's tons and tons of people, Trevor Noah, and then obviously lesser known, but you would know them probably way more than me. But I think about these moments where people use their platform to share their truth. And that is such a different experience. And so I'm interested, did you ever feel that pull? How do those expectations of sort of being funny come? Do you feel like there are roots and expectations on you, particularly identifying as a Black male? And what does that mean for you?
Well, I think my personal, like in any situation I'm in, I get pretty anxious in almost all social situations, especially podcasts where where
we're the one podcast that you've done. Yeah, got it. Yeah, keep going.
Where my default is to try and make people laugh because that makes me feel more comfortable. I don't know if it's, I mean, I have friends who are the opposite, who are Black. But I think that there's an element of awareness that, you know, I have to have, or Black men have to have, that we have to be almost hyper aware of how people are feeling around us, based on like our presence. Like, let's say something bad happens to me at a party. My natural reaction is to kind of push down how I like my genuine reaction. Excuse me. And react in a way that won't make me look like that won't make me embarrass all Black people. You know what I'm saying? And so, yeah, that's weird, and it's tough to navigate. But I've been doing it for so long that it's almost second nature. And thankfully, I find myself in less situations where that has to happen. But whether it be, you know, in my day job, you know, professionally, within comedy is a little bit more loose as far as like how we communicate to each other. So that's not a big deal in that arena. But or if I'm like visiting my girlfriend's family, I'm very like in full Obama mode, like, you know what I'm saying? So, but I don't know if that's a bad thing. It's not something that I like, that I identify as an issue that I think about regularly, but I know that it's there. Pretty much all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not like it only comes when you put the word comic next to you. You know, it's this thing that you are living with every day. And it's such a normalized way of living, which doesn't make it okay. But it's, again, sort of the platter idea of being handed this platter and this is how you act and how you're supposed to be. And I could imagine when you're trying to find your truth and your voice and speak through that. And sometimes, you know, I don't know if it's just in comedy, but in life in general, sort through even how you feel and what you're thinking. And that's an avenue for you to do that and to explore with your audience and to just kind of put things out into the world. I could imagine it adds a layer of, or it can, if you're not careful, adds a layer of censorship, because again, there's this expectation of you're not just a individual person, you're representing other people with shared identities, whether that's race, gender, intersecting identities, but there's a pressure there that can be hard. And figuring out who you are and also the evolution of that person, because, you know, again, I've known you for 20 years, but that would never be fair to say you're the same person that I met when, I don't know, we were 14 or 15 or something when we met. You know, you evolve and change too. And so there's this interesting timestamp where so much of how you're growing and sharing and changing now is going to be in a public setting because you're sharing yourself in this way. So how tricky that can be too, of like, what do I say here and how can it be changed and evolved or scrutinized? And so it just feels like a lot of pressure when you're trying to figure out who you are.
Definitely. And it's twofold too. It's trying to figure out who I am as, you know, just a man in the world, trying to figure out my voice comedically. You know, to her credit, my girlfriend hears the bulk of my ideas that I want to pitch on stage as soon as I get the ideas. The challenge that we run into, we're in an interracial relationship, and so we're not fully aligned on like our past experiences or like cultural differences and things like that. So sometimes I, you know, bring up ideas and she has no idea like what I'm talking about. And I'm like, well, no, you have to understand that, like, and then I like pitch the idea. And she's like, yeah, I don't get it. But then, you know, sometimes I'll still take it to stage and then, it works. But I don't know. It's tough to find, let's say, like, you know, I have an opinion on a current event and it's based on, you know, my upbringing and my experience as a Black man and comedian, like all of my labels. And it's an unpopular opinion, or maybe it's something that hasn't been thought about. And just like the idea versus the final joke form, they're two different things. So like having the idea, my like gut reaction to something may not be palatable for, you know, consumption in mass. But if I'm sharing it with my girl, we have to work through like, no, babe, this isn't the joke. This is just how I feel about it. And I'm like, I would like to talk it out with you to maybe to one, get, you know, understanding of how I feel about it actually, so that then it can transform into something that gives someone that aha moment on stage. But that is like really difficult to do because sometimes even in the idea phase, I'm running it by my girl, I have to censor it a little bit there. So it's like, that's when I call up one of the bros and I'm like, yo, let's talk for real now. like, you know what I'm saying? Just like, I don't know, speaking candidly, is super important to me and is like a key part of like my writing, but there's not a lot of arenas for that, especially when the topic is a little bit or like teeters into controversial space or hot takes, as the kids say.
Well, and I think especially, you know, again, in the culture, I hate how everything is like the culture of social media, because it's also can be beautiful and powerful if we use it effectively. But there's a fear around it too of you want to be authentic, you want to be seen, but so much is snippets. And out of contextualization. And so you're having to figure that out. But again, you're creating something. Like I remember, obviously comedy is not the same as painting, but when I mean, you might even remember this, like in high school and into college, I painted a lot of like kind of dark things. And, you know, for people who don't know, my mom was on the streets struggling with a crack cocaine addiction in prison. I was like dealing with a lot around that and a lot of trauma that I had faced. And I remember at one point, my grandma saying, do you think one time we could paint something we could hang on the walls? And I was like, oh. And there was this moment where I was just like, what I'm putting out here and what I'm trying to say is it's too much for people, too raw. And it wasn't even a taboo thing. Like, I mean, I was probably painting things people didn't like they didn't like seeing that I painted things like suicide being represented or substance use and things like that. But it was this very, I don't know how to make sense of what I'm feeling. And I just need to put it somewhere so I can sit with it and figure it out. But when you don't then have people that'll be in that depth with you, and it's so hard. And even as a therapist, the shit people say sometimes in the room, it is so hard to be like, be with this with them. Like, because you have a reaction. You're a human. You're going to have a reaction if it's somebody that's, you know, far into the QAnon side of things and they're sharing things with me. And I'm like, okay, all right, let's just be with this. Let's talk through it. That's not, your point isn't to react to their belief. Your point is to be with them as humans. But that's a really challenging thing to do. So I say all this to say, I could imagine for you, it's like you have to go to the innermost place of curiosity and introspection, which the only real way to do it is to go to places of unpopular belief and idea, even if it doesn't, trying it on and it doesn't fit for you, but you have to go there to figure it out. And that kind of mixed with the layers of censorship, mixed with the expectations, mixed with just shame as a cultural norm, sounds like it's exhausting sometimes for you. And learning how to do it and find your way to do it and seeing people who have seemingly figured it out. Like Dave Chappelle is just a big example for me. And I mostly just think about it because he and some of his Netflix specials got me to think about things that I've never, like that moment you're describing, I never thought about it the way that he mentioned it. And I'm like, wow, what if I sat with that possibility? How cool is that? And so you see it working, but this is a different challenge than you getting through, I'm staying on my friend's couch, I'm supposed to be X, Y, and Z place. This is how do I figure out a system to be deeply, truly, unapologetically me and know that that might feel offensive to people, but not take that as my responsibility and also be okay with that as I'm figuring out what I believe and also how I want to share that on stage.
Right. Yeah. That's one of my biggest challenges right now. As a comic, there's so many ideas that I table for later because I feel uncomfortable like tackling them on stage, which is so frustrating to say out loud because almost every time I've done it so far, I haven't regretted it. There's been people who've been like, damn, I was thinking that too, bro. Like, and that's the stuff that connects with people the most, especially within comedy, is like you said, with Dave Chappelle diving head first into topics that, you know, most people are afraid to talk about, but have opinions on or like want to learn more about. But the culture's kind of created this imaginary barrier where, you know, the average person's expectation is to just take things as they are and not explore. And exploration is often misconstrued as hatred or bigotry or insensitivity. And I don't subscribe to that. That's another thing that, you know, pushed me towards comedy is that curiosity and that fact that the internet deals in extremes. It is fueled on extremes. But I wholeheartedly believe that the average person, no matter where they are, has way more in common with like someone in LA has so much more in common with someone in Florida. But you go on the internet and and the internet would lead you to believe that there's all this divisiveness and like, it's either this or that. Like a lot of people are in the gray area, in the in between, and that's where I live as far as comedy goes. But it's also attacking that resistance to embrace that camaraderie amongst cultures, even within our own country. Like shit, even within my own relationship, I'm like, babe, let's talk about this. Like, because this, whatever topic we're butting heads on now, we're gonna butt heads on it later. We plan to ride this thing out till forever. Like we can't shy away from shit. And I take the same approach in comedy, but sometimes it's, I'm not getting paid what Dave Chappelle's getting paid yet. Right. So there's a hesitance because I have a day job, I have responsibilities. I have a cat that I, want to put through art school.
Yeah. Well, you never got to go. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Living your legend. I get it.
Yes. So yeah, there's still challenges that I face within that I just gotta, just push through, because I feel like people appreciate that when they're in the crowd. There could be one person who's like, but most people who come to a comedy show are coming to laugh, and a lot of dark shit makes people laugh. And that actually has helped me cope with a lot of dark stuff in my life, the lives of people that I love. So, yeah.
I mean, I think so much too about what you described is, your fear now, my assumption is that it gets fueled kind of by, I don't know, I call them social justice warriors. That might be not the nicest thing to say, but it's this notion. It happens all the time in Portland. I fucking hate it. Like, so I specialize in eating disorders. I do a lot of work in body image. I struggled with an eating disorder. Like, I know what it means to hate your body. I'm also aware that I have a privilege of living in a smaller body. Like, I'm not dumb. I know that there are different experiences for different people. And even here, I got called by somebody who saw a picture of my face that for a training I was leading on eating disorders, that said that they didn't think that I had the right to teach on eating disorders because I lived in a small body. They only saw my face. So there was a little bit of an assumption there. And the idea that I couldn't speak to a certain experience, I couldn't train on certain things, which I get. And I understand that to some degree. But then it's, well, is this okay to say? Is this inclusive? Is that actually offensive to say that? What about this thing? And I think this is very much, and this kind of came even from the Dave Chappelle, I forget which one it was, but where he kind of talked about like a lot of the voices are like angry white women that like raise issues all the time. And so I'll be in a training, whether it's that, and someone's like, well, I don't know, that seems like we can't use that word and we can't say these things. And I remember one time I said, well, that feels like a really heavy burden to bear. And somebody put in the chat that they thought that was a fat phobic comment and that I couldn't use the word heavy. It's like, fuck, this just feels exhausting, because now I'm afraid to say anything, and I think that's sometimes what happens is now we're like course correcting so much because nobody wants to be the racist, the sexist, the homophobic, the whatever person. So we course correct so much that it's like, well, I can't even explore a topic that could be adjacent to the adjacent topic to the topic that is somehow connected to the topic, because then I'm a bad person. And so I think that there's some piece to that too. And so I think part of it is learning to not get pulled into other people's fear that's based on their shame. That's a countrywide, or honestly a worldwide issue that we need to sort through. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's where my brain went when you were talking about it.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I think because, I, in my comedy career, I've had those same feelings like, damn, is this joke gonna piss off X, Y, and Z? And I feel like there's so much power in indifference when it comes to that, like the fear of that reaction. And I know it's not realistic to like feel nothing. Obviously, you don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but I always have this discussion with my boss at my day job is that, any work related conflict that that her and I have ever had, or like anybody at work. I told her when I first started that I never let it get to a point where it blows up, because in getting to know people that I work with, if I can identify that I'm speaking to a good person with good intentions, then it should never blow up. It's just a misunderstanding. And I kind of adopt that within comedy, but instead of like, I'm talking to a good person, it's we're at a comedy show and every joke, good, bad, offensive, unfunny, it all comes from the attempt to make people laugh and feel good. And some are, there's some shitty jokes out there, and there's some really bad ones, and some that are insensitive, but it all comes from the same place. And you don't really know what's funny until you say it out loud. And the thing that I, learned from, I feel like Chappelle has gotten canceled like the last 4 specials that he's done, but excuse me, it was really cool to see Netflix not been to that. And I know it's mostly because it's Dave Chappelle. He's like best comedian of all time.
So, he brings in a fuck ton of money. Yeah.
So much money, and not everybody has that luxury. But through that, we saw that like people will get over it. I used to, earlier in my career, I used to tell this joke about how I didn't buy into cancel culture, because I don't think the average person is out at the club upset and their friend comes up to him like, "Hey man, what's wrong? Are you good?" He's like, "How can I have fun when, Kylie Jenner has cornrows?" or something, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like this really stupid shit that has no impact on any normal, I won't say any like average Joe walking the streets. Right. And, eventually it's a 24-hour news cycle. Like what people are mad over today, they won't be mad over tomorrow. And I also think that, a lot of outrage is manufactured. It's not like actual people mad. Like, who are these people that are mad? Like, have you met them before? Like, what is their name? What do they do? What do they do for them? And it's just like a headline on, some shitty news site that people are outraged because Kylie Jenner has cornrows. Right. And it's like, I don't know anybody mad about that. People got bills and shit. So like, yeah, who has the time?
Well, and I think it, so much of that too is like, I love what you said about the interaction with another person and sort of them being a good person. And I think comedy is, you're standing up on stage and there has to be an inherent degree of trust, and that's person to person interaction. That's also in comedy. And so the trust has to be, you have to trust that the person standing up on stage has the intention to open the door for a conversation, to be vulnerable, to explore, to maybe teach you something, to make you laugh. And then you as the comedian have to have trust in your audience that they're going to be open to receiving that. And I think that there are definitely people that use their stage, their platform, whether it's in my field and they're public speaking and they're, posting YouTube videos about supposed wellness, and it's all secretly, some front for some ridiculous oppressive standards, or it's like only promoting certain things. There are people that use the comedic stage as a way to put other people down. That's never going to be a thing that doesn't exist, but that's not specific to comedy. That's just the fact. My 3-year-old now gets to watch, well, it takes her like 3 weeks because she only gets 30 minutes of TV a week. So it's like, we're, I don't know, an hour and 6 minutes into The Lion King. So we know, like, I know what's about to happen, but she doesn't yet. So, but as we're watching these, she now knows any of the movies she's watched. We've seen Frozen, we're into The Lion King, we've seen The Princess and the Frog, we've seen, a bunch of different movies. She literally has made the case now. She's like, the problem in the world, and this is my 3-year-old, and I did not teach her this as much as I would love to take credit, other than just telling her who the person who does bad things. We try not to say the bad guy. This is also, mom, the shame therapist. But she says, everybody wants power and money. And I was like, because that's every one of these characters. They want to kill the queen to have power or take over in some way. And so there are always going to be people that do that, but those people are in pursuit of power and money. And the way to truly, when you're in that point of pursuit, power is only obtained through the oppression of other people. So that's absolutely happening. But what you're describing is getting to that point where you have to trust yourself enough to know that you're not that person, and that you have to have trust in your audience and you that you're going to explore this vulnerable interaction together. Because it's only in that vulnerability can the truth really be told. And it's hard. I mean, as a speaker, especially in a virtual setting, when I'm speaking and I don't get any feedback, it's not a conversation. I have no fucking clue what they think about me when they leave a presentation. I just did a corporate wellness talk and it was like 500 some people. They all looked dead to me. And I was like, well, they hate me. That's 500 more people in the world that think I'm a fraud. And that's your imposter syndrome and shame and all the stories from when we were 13 and 14 and, even middle school coming back. But the reality is most don't. Most are just consuming information. And it's really hard because you don't get feedback in the moment. You might get laughs, but not everybody's laughing right away. Some people are like, I'm absorbing a lot of information and he's making me think about something that I wasn't expecting because I was just coming for the cheap laugh. And now I'm thinking about something and I don't know how to make sense of this. Do I laugh? Do I not laugh? What do I think? And that's powerful too. But all that comes from trusting that you have the right to be on that stage and to explore that with good intentions, and your audience, trusting your audience that their intentions can be good too. And that's really hard. And like you said, there's this, I don't want to shut doors that aren't open to me yet. I don't want to not be able to pursue things because of X, Y, and Z. I think about whatever award show it was that Kevin Hart was going to host, and then it got taken from him because of some video Oscars from like 10 years ago. The Oscars. And it's like all this kind of stuff where you have to trust that people are with good intentions exploring things, and not everybody is with the intention to hurt. And I think cancel culture is that idea. We're projecting intention instead of creating opportunities to learn. So like I could give two shits if she's got cornrows in her hair. But I do think it's really important to consider the fact that sometimes the way people are dressing, acting, wearing might be borrowing or stealing from cultures that it might be important to learn about and to acknowledge and to recognize. And so do I think she should be canceled? No, I've done shit that's probably racist and sexist. And I've definitely done things I know that are ableist and all sorts of things. I want to be held accountable, but I don't want to be made to feel like a terrible person, because at that point, cancel culture is just basically an explosion of shame. Okay, I know we're near the end of our time together. So tell me, let's pretend that, well, you will hear this like 6 months from now because we're recording this early. So when you hear this, you're going to have more of those days where you're like, the fear is here. I just need to say what I want to say. I'm struggling to trust this, or, my girlfriend and I are talking about these things and I feel like we're at an impasse again and it feels really hard. What do you want that Tavaris to remember in those moments so that he can push past some of that fear and that shame?
It's a great question. I think just remembering times before in life where I pushed through it, specifically in my relationship and, family dynamics. One of the most recent examples I could think of, I mean, there's so much to talk about coming out of the pandemic on stage, and the perspective of, I think everybody came out of it with what the fuck just happened perspective, and just varying versions of that. I know that, some of our biggest disagreements between my girlfriend and myself came around, the vaccination time. And, that was a really tough time for us because, she was more on the side of, let's get this, let's, protect each other, our families and everything like that, which I totally subscribe to. But also from my upbringing as a Black man, Black people come from a lot of years of government induced stress, we'll call it. And so that created a fear within, I mean, it was a fear that's instilled in me still. Like, I don't trust much that comes from, our government, but I also don't spend a lot of time with a tinfoil hat on. Right. But at the same time, in dealing with that highly fearful situation with conflicting views with, my life partner, it was tough. And there was a lot of shame worldwide surrounding certain points of view and certain fears. And, I took more of the stance of everybody's fear is valid, and what actually helped us get through it was me taking this very serious dispute between me and my girlfriend and, harnessing that and putting it into a stand-up bit that was like, it really pushed me forward, like in my stand-up career, where this idea that I'm like, I'm scared to talk about shit, or I'm scared to say how I really feel because I'm scared to lose what I've, gained, and scared to be looked at in a certain way. There was a time where I didn't run these ideas by her regarding my perspective and like reasons why I was terrified to get vaccinated initially, and the historical implications of that. And then also like the pressure from Hollywood figures and celebrities and the pandering that kind of took place, where they did they were doing music videos about it, and just taking that to stage in Los Angeles is so, specifically LA, is so terrifying at the time. But when I just did that shit, I was like, oh wow, this room full of people is laughing. They're digesting my perspective. And it is a controversial perspective according to the internet. But they're with me on it because they probably share some fear. There's Black people. I see a couple of Black people in the crowd now, nodding along, yeah, that was crazy. And so through that actually helped, essentially save my relationship with my girl, because she saw that. She was like, oh, wow, damn. And then the cool thing about it was these jokes worked in LA. These jokes worked in Utah. These jokes worked in Austin. These jokes worked in Seattle. So in my, journey as a comedian, it's that's why I feel so strongly that we're closer than, people lead us to believe. It's just about getting that perspective out there, but keeping in mind that there is the challenge of making that shit digestible, because, some stuff is really invokes a pretty, drastic emotion out of people. So you just have to be mindful, but still know that it's important to get it out there. So I think, to answer your question, just remembering that, because every time I've jumped out there and said some perceived wild shit, I haven't regretted it. And it's almost, I'm batting 1,000 as far as the laughs go. So just keeping that in mind, that, somebody out there shares a perspective. And if not, they've never heard that perspective and are now thinking about it.
Yeah.
And just to keep it pushing. Yeah.
One of the things that when I started my public speaking career, Jordan told me, he said, people really just want a connection. They just want to feel a person to person connection. And I'm not saying any new point. I'm not teaching them something. It's not science. I mean, it is science, but I didn't go do the research. I'm not teaching them on some new topic. I'm helping synthesize information and put it out there in a way that hopefully people can relate to. And I think comedy, it's sort of the same thing. People are looking for a place to feel seen and to feel like they can be safe to explore. And I think that is you giving the gift of your authentic voice is the only way that they're going to have that, because there's a fuck ton of cookie cutter comics. There's a lot, and they get the cheap laugh, but it's Dunkin' Donuts versus a gourmet donut shop. Like, I'm still going to eat it if you buy it, but it's still kind of a shit donut, you know? And so I think you allowing yourself to be that version of you, and then to give yourself grace when you do the Dunkin' Donuts joke every once in a while, and you find yourself going back to that, because you do have to give yourself the space to realize you do have trauma, you do have shame, you do have systems that have been designed to make you feel less than, that you are still having to work against and exist around. And so it's all of that wrapped up into one. So I know you're on your way to a show tonight, which will have already happened come the time that people listen to this. But you have, I mean, it seems like you have shows all the time. Where is going to be the best place for people to get a feel for your voice and to connect and learn from you?
Any of my live shows. I'm mostly in LA right now, but I'm traveling all around the country. I got San Francisco tonight. I'll be in Austin and San Diego next month. If this has the reach to get to Switzerland, I'll be in Switzerland.
I'll work on it. That's nice.
So hopefully I just sold some tickets there. And, and also on my YouTube, just search Tavaris Smith comedian, and it all pops up. I got full sets. I got clips. If you can't make it to the show, yeah, that's where I'm at.
I love it. Well, before we say our final goodbyes, I'm curious, let's end the same way we started. So what is one word that you would use to describe how you feel right now?
Relieved.
Well, now you can say you've had your first official podcast in the book. So that's a pretty big deal. Yeah.
Yes.
Even though all the podcasts you've ever done have obviously, made you really anxious and all these things. Right. So your next one will feel like butter. It'll be totally smooth and easy to go. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Smooth, like dolphin foreheads.
Like a dolphin forehead. I like that.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm see again, this is like did I do something bad? Because I definitely paid at SeaWorld to swim with a dolphin one time, and I have touched a dolphin's forehead, and it is very smooth.
It's smooth, yeah.
Yeah, but looking back on it, I feel like, again, that's one of those things that I should have known better. Like after, what was it? Is it Tiger King? Tiger Kings? Whatever it was. But then I went, yeah, I think that probably wasn't okay what I did.
Yeah, dolphin over here.
Yeah, but I can attest to the fact that they have a very smooth forehead. So there is at least that attestation coming your way.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you so much. This has been absolutely wonderful. I hope you have the safest drive to get to your next show tonight. I know you're still traveling the rest of the way. And I mean, look, WeWork's Wi-Fi held up pretty well. So
I know they're killing it. Yeah, they got the LED lights and everything here. So.
I mean, let's talk about that too. If we're really ending it on it's a 24-hour news cycle that has definitely been a company with a lot of ups and downs, and they're still here. So if they can do it, you can withstand a couple of painful jokes every once in a while.
Exactly.
Well, thank you everyone for listening. Please come back for another episode so you can continue to do your own work and listen to other people as they are learning to write their own story and untether themselves from shame.